Today I wanted to talk about something that we all love and hate probably equally, which is influence. And I was motivated by a blog post on punk views on social media, of all things. A post by Danny Brown, who's definitely one of the more noteworthy industry watchers. And it sort of brought up a couple interesting points about influence that I wanted to ask the panel about. And number one is everything with clout. Are people gone sort of too crazy with clout and the notion of influence? Is this gotten out of control, or is this basically a necessary tool for those of us who want to be trying to figure out who's important and who's not in social media? What do you think, Jeff? Is this like, are people going too crazy with these measures, and is clout just a bunch of BS?
To a certain extent, yes and no. I mean, clout is it's a good indicator for some things, but I mean, clout really can't define whether a person is a good influencer or not. You know, I have higher clout than some people who have 300 followers, and that doesn't mean I'm more influential. It just means me and my friends like to interact. So it's really kind of one of those things where you can't really just judge a book by a number.
I think clout is a good tool to look at when you're trying to determine somebody's influence, but it's nothing that I would ever make a decision based on, because it is very flawed, as we know. They have, in the last 6 months, introduced topics, which is a little bit more helpful because, like Jeff was just saying, he's influential on clout. He's a higher clout number than some people he knows, but if you look at the topics that he's influential about, they're going to be different. So I think it's all relevant.
I'm glad you said relevant, because that was actually one of the key points of Danny Brown's piece, which is, there's being influential in general, and then there's being influential around a topic or in an area. And to me, relevance is what's really key. I mean, if I want to find somebody who's influential in, fine arts, they're very different than somebody who's a more general, media influencer, for example. And
Absolutely.
Doesn't it just come down to, we need to find the right people. We need to find the right people in the right areas that we're interested in or that we want to target as marketers.
Exactly. It's all about targeting the right people and crafting your message for them individually. You can't just target a whole bunch of people and say, okay, well, they're influential, so I need their help, but influential in what?
Well, I mean, there are some rock stars, celebrity types where, what they say kind of resonates across multiple audiences, but for the most part, I would say, the mommy blogger audience, for instance, relevant to some, not to all. Not necessarily something that a beer company, for instance, would really find the right audience with. And so I think matching who you're trying to reach when you're working with influencers, who you're trying to reach and who the audience would be for that influencer, it really weighs in quite a bit.
So the other angle that I wanted to ask the panel about is sort of the notion of influence as a brand versus influence as an individual. And it seems like when we get caught up with clout and we get caught up with some of these sort of individual measures, that's where kind of ego and reputation kind of comes in. Maybe when we think about like an organization's influence or a brand's influence, then it's less about sort of ego and things like that. What do you think, Jeff? Is that kind of, do we get caught up in clout because it's more about people, and then people, get either full of themselves, or they, get upset because they're not rating high enough? Is that the same case when brands think about influence, of a brand or of a company?
I think to a certain extent, there's the ego factor that goes into influencers. I think companies are less prone to that than the individual influencer, because I don't think they really care about they care about influencing their customers and getting more customers. They don't care about kind of the social aspect that comes with it, and being considered an influencer. That's really not companies' goals. So the ego kind of is one of those things that's made being an influencer, made defining what an influencer is difficult.
So what do you think, Rebecca? Let me give you the last word here. If we identify sort of the top X number of influencers in an area, is it good or bad if those influencers, have big egos? Is that to our benefit as marketers, or does that sort of make people less attractive as being part of a marketing program? Is ego good or bad, or is it just part of, do most people with a high score or a lot of influence, sort of the ego comes with the territory?
I think For a lot of people, ego does come with the territory. It also, again, it's relevant. It depends on the industry. When you're talking about social media influencers, there's a lot of egos out there, and we expect that. If you're talking about a different kind of industry, that might be a deterrent.
So great. So each of us has obviously our own influence. Hopefully this panel has a little bit of influence collectively. This episode of Inside Marketing, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.